Hey, good morning, 8Cs, receiving students and teachers. Thank you. May sit down. All right. 8Cs and students, today we're going to tape, all right? And the tape will be, it's something, like I said, when you're having your, your general skills exams, there'll be social science questions and science questions in there. So you need to be prepared for this. Okay, so for this tape, we'll just show you something about the living river. Okay, so 8Cs and receiving students, we'll put on the tape now, and I'd like you to sit down carefully and watch. All right? Okay, we'll start now, and here we go. I hope the volume is on.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Kitchen Survey. Today we are going to see an episode from the series The Web of Life, the Living River. Behind me is the Sirinomu Dam in Central Province. The water from this dam flows down the mountain to form the Laloki River. This river is important to Port Moresby not only because it's our source of drinking water or because we use its power as it flows down the mountain and generates electricity, but also because the river is the home of many living creatures important to us all. In this program, you will learn about some of the creatures that live in the river. It will be useful if you are studying Unit 7.4, Living Things, or 9.5, Ecology. Okay, here's our show.
The rough nights of autumn, when storm rains swell the rivers after summer drought. A time for human beings to get indoors and stay there. Not so for these creatures that live in the river. This is their time to get up and go. For them, autumn means the start of a great ocean journey. This writhing, twisting, sliding surge of movement downstream through the darkness and the driving rain is the departure of the eels. Ahead of them, an Atlantic crossing of 3,000 miles to their breeding grounds. This autumn migration is just one episode in the ever-changing life of the river. Look below the surface, and you'll see that the speed and depth and warmth of the water, the amount of light and the growth of plants, all are constantly changing. So the moods of the river change, and with it, the complex web of life that makes up the inner world of the river. In its beginnings, this river welled up as spring water through the chalk downlands that stored the winter rain. first spring sunshine emphasizes the beauty of the clear stream in its upper reaches. The kind of ingenuous beauty that goes with simplicity. Water, sunlight, and plant life. These are the three simple ingredients from which the whole swarming animal creation develops. Man and mayfly alike depend on the right balance of leaf and stem, light and water to start the food chain that nourishes each and every living creature. A fresh chalk stream, not yet befouled by human agencies, is wonderfully rich in the food that makes possible the new season's urgent clamour of birth and growth. Now is the time when the young eels or elvers are on the move, upstream, returning to the ancestral home. These are not the progeny of the adults that migrated last autumn. No, these lively youngsters are in fact 3-year-olds. Their first 3 years of life have been spent in drifting back to England from the Sargasso Sea. And now they're big enough and strong enough to tackle this struggle over obstacles and against the stream. All along the coast of Europe, the elvers in their thousands and millions make this dramatic entry into rivers and streams. Many will die on the way. Some will be netted and cooked and eaten. But they survive their losses. That tremendous explosive surge of new life carries them forward. Just look at this for determination. And yet by itself, an elver isn't much more than a couple of inches of animated shoelace. But in the mass, there's no stopping them. When they've pushed as far upstream as they need to go, the elvers can settle down to 7, 8, perhaps 10 years or more of life in the river, growing into mature eels. Every survivor will eventually go back to the sea, one stormy autumn night when that mysterious summons calls them. Also moving up from the sea into the river now is another eel-like creature, though it's not a true relation of the elvers. It's an extremely primitive animal called a lamprey. Its mouth is like a rubber suction pad and grips any object on the river bottom, even an old milk bottle. It's parasitic, and at sea attaches itself to fish, boring into their flesh with the tongue and teeth in its sucker. The openings along the side lead to the gill chambers, so that when the sucker is gripping, the gills can breathe in as well as out. It won't feed at all in the river, simply mate, spawn, and then die. A few years later, the young lampreys will make their way to the sea, and they're mature. Exactly the opposite to the eels. In fast-flowing water, the lamprey can stand still by gripping any object on the riverbed. Keeping close to the bottom is one of the techniques of living in a river, and if you haven't got a suction pad to grip with, you must use other methods. Shape, body design, can make all the difference. The problems of living on the floor of the river tend to produce a similar shape as a solution. Like being flat. As flat as a flounder, often found well upstream. In its early life, this flounder swam upright, with an eye on each side of its head, like any normal fish. And then it keeled over, rolled one eye round to the other side of its head, and settle down to adult life in this fashion. Camouflage is very important if you don't lead an active life. Another fish which seems to merge into the riverbed is the loach, active mainly at night. It samples anything edible that comes its way with its prominent whiskers. They're called barbels, and they check by tasting. And another nighttime hunter is the miller's thumb or bullhead. By day it hides under stones or among weeds, and like the other bottom dwellers, it has a natural camouflage which makes it hard to detect. Trout eat bullheads, and bullheads eat lesser things, like this flattened mayfly larva. So it's important to be inconspicuous. To survive in the community of the river, it's necessary to develop a specialized way of life that doesn't have too many competitors. And there can't be many more ingenious specialists than the caddis larvae. Here, his case of stones protects and disguises him. Another specialist has been at work here, spider-like, spinning these nets. Delicate silken lacework, and yet strong enough to resist the fast current. It's a trap operated by another kind of caddis. There are nearly 200 different species of caddis flies in Britain. This is one of the net-making sort, only about ½ an inch long. Its net sieves out items of food as they're carried downstream, and it's continually checking on the catch. No one quite knows what this brush-like appendage at the end of the body is for, but it's possibly to do with sensing the flow of the current. Freshwater shrimps like this one are a welcome catch. The caddis depends on the force of the current to carry the shrimp into the net. Different types of caddis operate variations on the theme of netting. Some catch their prey in slower moving currents, where they spin a different sort of net. They don't have a fast current working for them, and so they can't just sit and wait. They must be more active. All along the bottom of the river, these life and death encounters are commonplace. Each creature uses its own special technique to get a living from what's available. If you rise up from the riverbed to the middle depths, you enter a quite different world. Clinging to the stems of the weeds are large numbers of simulid larvae. They'll eventually hatch into a small black fly with a nasty bite. But now they're involved in hanging on by their tail suckers while their mouth brushes filter the water and gather tiny particles of food coming down with the current. If they get washed off, they can throw out threads and hang on to the weed. In a stretch of 100 yards, there could be 40 million of these simulids at the height of summer. 40 million. It's on that scale of prodigality that life breeds in the river, some to survive, many to be eaten. The underwater plants that carry them act also as cover for the fish fry, the defenseless young. These are baby dace. Water weeds are to them what trees and bushes are to fledgling birds. And like land plants, the river vegetation sprouts and grows and dies, offering food and shelter in a world quite different from that of the flounder and bullhead on the river bottom. Each level has its own inhabitants, as organized as a block of flats. To hold your position here, you need a slender slipstream figure and a built-in buoyancy. The pike is the king predator of this underwater world. Like the lion on land or the shark at sea, the pike is the summit of a food chain, endangered by no enemy except man. No dace or roach is safe from that killer mouth, not even another pike. When it's hunting, the pike lurks close to the bank or beside a clump of waterweed. It will sometimes come up to the surface to snatch a duckling, but the upper level of the river has little to offer a hungry pike. It wouldn't be tempted by this mayfly, which has dropped onto the surface of the river. But other eyes have spotted the drifting fly. A trout, that instant snapper up of the morsels that dapple the stream like rain when the mayfly hatch suddenly fills the air. Out in midstream, the current moves at its fastest. Come alongside the bank and the slower tide produces yet another community of specialists. This skater needs calm and sheltered conditions for his delicate art of skimming along on the surface film. In the warm spring sunshine, the river becomes a conveyor belt, carrying along insects of many kinds, choice morsels to be picked up by the riverside birds. According to taste and to need, there is everywhere food in abundance. Meat for some, and a vegetarian diet for others. Although this pleasant character is often called a water rat, he's not a rat of any kind. He's a vole, a water vole. He swims well, eats plants and leaves, and minds his own business. Also mainly vegetarian is the mallard, the wild duck. Some ducks dive to feed, but the mallard just does a half somersault, upending to reach the trailing weeds. Here they've been joined by a bird with a very different diet, a dabchick, or more correctly, a little grebe. The dabchick hunts underwater and often dives down for small fish and a great variety of insects. So dabchick and mallard are not rivals, not competitors for the same kind of food. And the most savage predator of all. Only 3 or 4 inches long, the water shrew is a killer of anything he can overcome. And he's a bundle of energy. He has to keep moving in order to eat, and he has to keep eating in order to move. Shrews are made like that, hungry and quarrelsome and excitable. Inside this burrow, in a nest of leaves and grass and moss, the young water shrews are born. And with a growing family, the parent fishes even more frantically. He looks silvery underwater because of the air bubbles trapped in his fur. Continually on the hunt, he brings death and confusion to the small inhabitants of the river. And he's now got a good store of sticklebacks, valuable insurance against unsuccessful hunting. But the wounds that nature inflicts are wounds that heal. Each summer brings a new abundance for all to share. The diversity of life, the variety and ingenuity of so many specialists mean that the pressure of demand is never too great at any one point. Every type of plant that grows will be used in some way. Every kind of insect is liable to be eaten. A sedge warbler, slipping down to its nest, well hidden in the lush riverside vegetation. The great flowering of summer is committed to the launching of a new generation. For the wren, the river now provides abundant food for its young. Along every link in the food chain, the pressure is on plant and insect and fish and bird. Reed buntings have a full-time job. The helpless young, in their thousands, must be fed and protected. The whole web of life will be stretched and strained, but it won't break. The river can regenerate itself. Each and every form of living thing will recuperate and renew itself. Based on sunlight, it's the natural flourishing system, perfectly balanced, beautifully organized. That is, until we interfere. Where excessive amounts of inorganic chemicals drain into the river from adjoining land, the critical balance of natural life is disturbed. The lush and varied plant life of the riverbed is smothered and destroyed by useless flannel weed, which flourishes at the expense of everything else. The leafless, slimy mats of algae create a wasteland in which little can live. Flannel weed is promoted by such salts as the nitrates and phosphates that flow from sewage works or from farmland where chemical fertilizers are washed from the land into the river. The natural cure is by dilution in the watery abundance of the stream. But if we extract increasing volumes of water and put in more and more waste chemicals, we pass the safety limit and the living river begins to die. This trout has moved on to a healthier stretch of the river. Here there are no signs of pollution as yet. Nothing to distract the eye from the normal scenes of an autumn day by the riverside. A bank vole enjoying the blackberries. He's about half the size of a water vole. In the willows, a young swallow, soon to be heading southward before the autumn storms begin, when the eels will travel down to the sea and the river rises again. The rushing waters carry down and build up mats of fallen leaves, willow leaves, dead, but at the same time life for the water vole. The lifestyle of this little animal is geared to the river. His main activities are eating and not being eaten. He's always on the lookout for danger, perhaps a pike or a heron. He's a great burrower and seldom needs the safety of cover. His coat is a key to his survival and must be kept in good condition at all times. Most small furry animals are a delight to watch, and voles are no exception. When we reckon what a river is worth to us, do we put any value on the sight of a vole, completely absorbed as this one is, in cleaning and grooming itself? In the economy of the river, this aquatic vegetation, which gave cover to fishes and an anchorage to insects, now feeds the voles. And what's left will form a kind of compost. Everything must be consumed in some fashion, eaten by animals or rotted down to nourish next year's growth. Already, with the death of the leaves in autumn, there's promise of life in the coming spring. The falling leaves will drift at first on the surface for anyone to pick up, and then gradually they'll sink, part of the season's debris that goes to generate the latent energy within the river. Fruits and seeds add their distinctive colors to the days of autumn. A few will be dispersed to start new plants. Many will decompose in the river or along the banks. Some will float away on the wind. Many will be eaten. They act like a magnet to goldfishes. As autumn deepens, there's a softer, more languorous mood along the river. Some of the clamor and stridency of a new generation begins to relax. One or two snipe come and probe in the moist soil of the water meadows. The swans, free now from the anxieties of breeding, have started to form the flocks in which they'll keep company together through the winter. The power of the sun is declining. Along the valley, mist gathers, softening the outlines of things. Air and water, sunshine and shadow seem now to merge into each other. The clarity of summer has given way to this gentler scene of half-tone mysteries. Even the coot are subdued. And the mallard are a picture of contentment. Floating past in the evening light, in that serene way of theirs, how truly they justify the poet who wrote, "Yes, ducks are soothing things." But even the most Indian of summers must end. The best of autumns is a transitory pleasure. Sooner or later, the hard times of winter set their mark on the landscape. The river starts to rise, replenished with rain and melting snow. And now it has a new role to play, as the land freezes and locks up its food stores under frosty ground. Whenever the streams are moving fast enough to prevent ice forming, the water will stay open. The precious feeding grounds below the surface are not denied to those who now desperately need them as other sources fail. When snow and ice have taken a firm hold of the land, there are worse places to be than here in the river. For those who are waterproof, it can be a haven from the extreme rigors of winter. Here, for example, is an unlikely amphibian. Not web-footed, quite able to find food in the air or on land. But the colder the weather, the more will the dipper rely on the food he can find on the riverbed. Looking like a very large wren, the dipper has this surprising ability to walk out of its depth and submerge. In the gravel of the riverbed, it routs out insect larvae. A familiar sight on fast-flowing streams, bobbing and curtsying restlessly, and searching continuously for food. At this time of year, with limited daylight, it must be busy most of the time. And could any other bird appear to be less suited for such a way of life? It hasn't much in common with duck or cormorant, but it gets results. Against the force of the current and the buoyancy of its own body, it seems to use its wings to hold position and give a downward thrust. With the basic design of a land bird, it has adapted itself with remarkable efficiency to this amphibious existence. Where each short stretch of a river supports a dipper or two, you can be sure the water's in good condition. Plenty of life in it. Winter means hibernation for some, but for the trout it's their busiest season. Where the current flows swiftly and is rich in oxygen, the female trout starts to excavate a trench. Using her tail, she creates the red, as the trench is called, and starts spawning, dropping her eggs into the red. Then she quickly covers them with gravel after the male has fertilized them with his milt. Batches of eggs are deposited over several days. Soon the adults, hungry now from fasting, will abandon them and go downstream to richer feeding grounds. If the eggs aren't well covered, spring floods may wash them away, and bullheads may eat them. When the young fry hatch out, they must fend for themselves. Food is provided in the form of a yolk sac. Even so, many will perish. But some will survive. Enough each season to renew the stock in the river. Enough, that is, if the natural cycle, the web of life, is not distorted and broken by human pressures that the river can no longer withstand. The new season starts with hope. The thrust of a fresh beginning comes green and growing and bright with promises.
And receiving students, that brings us to the end of our video. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video, okay, and you watched or you saw some of the important, not important, but yes, some of the living things in the river, okay, all right, and what their role or what they do, okay, these things. Anyway, we'll stop here. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. And receiving teachers, our keyword, river. Okay, thank you, 8Cs and receiving students for watching today.